Welcome to the Duckpin Podcast with your host, Brian Griffiths. And now, here's Brian.
Gun policy has always been something that has brought out passions in both sides. And if you are somebody like me who is an enthusiast of the Second Amendment, you know there are men and women across the country who are fighting to defend our Second Amendment rights. And our guest this week is somebody I have known for a long time. I don't even want to pretend to know how long I've known her. She is somebody who has been a passionate supporter of the Second Amendment, first in Maryland. Those of you who may remember her as Andy Maroney will remember her as that. But now she is the legislative director of the Texas State Rifle Association, Miss Andi Turner. Andi, it's so good to see you again.
It's so good to see you, Brian. I miss you guys.
Yeah, it sucks to have you in Texas. It's from our perspective, but I'm sure Texas is glad to have you. You'll be surprised to know we just had Sine Die this week.
I heard
nothing bad happened, which is kind of a
really.
I checked the MSI list,
okay.
And all of the stuff that. All of the stuff that the only bills that passed that they were keeping track of were ones they took no position on. So I'll take that as a victory, noting that the many other defeats we had elsewhere. But we're not here to talk about that tonight. We're here to talk about the work with the Texas State Rifle Association as their legislative director. Now, a full-time group, a full-time position like that in Maryland, something that we're not used to that here. So tell us a little bit about what your, what your day-to-day operation is, and kind of how you wound up with the spot with the TSRA.
Well, that's a good place to start. So you may remember I used to be chairman of the Maryland State Rifle and Pistol Association. Before I was chair, I was actually their legislative director. But Maryland being Maryland, it was a volunteer gig and a labor of love. And it is still a labor of love, but thank you, TSRA, I can now, pay some bills. So it happened that their legislative director departed in the fall and is, by all accounts, very happy doing his new gig. And I believe you remember my friend Shannon.
Mm-hmm.
So Shannon hooked me up with the NRA lobbyists down here. And I just kept having conversation after conversation after conversation with her. And then this thing opened up and I went in, and of course, I've got state association experience. I was chief of staff. I've been legislative director. All the things, I've been county chair of the GOP. I've been like all the things, right? So I go in, and I have to say, in my whole life, I've had two fun interviews. One was with Kelly Schultz at the Department of Labor. That was a good time. And I was like, okay, I thought that was going to be a lot harder than it was. But because Kelly, she's get the work done. She don't fool around. She gets it. You give her a goal, she achieves it. And so that was actually fun. But when I went into TSRA, Texas State Rifle Association, I went in, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there were 5 people, maybe 6. And it was just old home week. I mean, it was just, I really was like, I had all my notes, and I had talked to, everybody I needed to talk to. And I was ready. No, this was the most laid back, and it went on for like 2 hours. And I was like, oh my God. At the end of the interview, I looked at the executive director. I'm like, wow, I thought we were in there for like a half an hour. And I was like, that was the most fun afternoon I've had in a while. So yeah, they picked me up, and we have a PAC, a political action committee, which I am fundraising for. So if anybody wants to donate money to keep me employed doing the good work, tsrapac.com. You can also sign up for my emails for free. You don't have to be a member at tsrapac.com, and we will not sell your email address. So that's kind of how I got the job. So I started in November, and then there were all these like pre-session, like there always is, all these pre-session events, and it was like fire hose, drink. Because I'm meeting all the people, and I'm trying to make sure they recognize me. Of course, you're wearing these masks, right? So it's virtually impossible to get people to recognize you unless you like take off the mask, stand back, this, that, and the other thing. But anyway, we're getting, obviously, the whole country seems to be getting a little bit better with COVID. I'm going for my second shot tomorrow, so rock on. But yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of fun, a lot of work. I literally have, and I want to give you the right number, but I'm afraid I'm going to give you the wrong number. I literally have 250 bills on my tracker, and that is just related to guns, hunting, sportsmanship, protective orders, stuff. I mean, even when I worked for the Good Delegate, I didn't have 250 bills. And he filed a lot of bills.
Oh yeah, he did. Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second, because I mean, going from Maryland to Texas, just forget the stuff about the gun issue for a second, because I mean, we can talk about that all day. But Texas is a different animal in so many ways. But one way is the fact that Texas has their legislative sessions rather are structured differently, where it's really only the odd numbered years where substantive bills come up. I mean, I know that they have a shorter session in even numbered years, if I remember correctly. That's more of a budget session. But so you kind of jumped in and like, this is it. This is our shot for the next 2 years, and that was how you started immediately. So just kind of lay out like what that session is like, and how different that structure is from say other states.
Well, okay, so first of all, let's start with, we don't have a House of Delegates, we have a House of Representatives. Okay.
How many times have you messed that up?
Not yet.
Excellent.
Not yet. I've done it here in the House, but
that's fine. That's nobody's going to notice that.
Right. Like if I were talking to you or any of my friends, that's fine. But no, haven't messed that up yet. So I'm just waiting for that to happen, because somebody's going to look at me and go, oh. So it's really different. No, we don't have a budget session on the odd years. Okay. Now there is talk that Governor Abbott is going to call a special session to deal with redistricting. I don't know how that's going to go. They're still dealing with the freeze. So one thing y'all need to know about Texas is, because we're a warm state, it's like Maryland, right? In Maryland, we don't have New York City sized snowplows, right? You don't have the ones that are 2 stories tall, right?
At least we have them.
But because you need them, right? And it can be an F-250 or whatever with a snowplow, and usually that's enough. In Texas, we don't need them, because, I mean, generally speaking, a cold winter day is 45 degrees, which is, I mean, it's chilly. But we got hit with Ice-mageddon, or if Mark Nugent might say, ice-pocalypse. And like, nobody could go anywhere for a week. Fortunately, it was early enough in session that like I could phone call and email and Zoom and whatever else and get work done. But it was, I mean, we were all pretty much stuck. And so most of Texas is on its own grid called ERCOT. And they're dealing with these issues. And I was just reading the news before I pinged you on this. And apparently the Texas grid is saying, hey, we've had some warm days, so if y'all could conserve energy. So, and there's some criticism over that, but it's like, well, I mean, we do that in Maryland too in the middle of the summer. So not really that unusual. So that has been a very big issue down here, because a lot of people, and I'm sure you saw some of the pictures, gosh, over at University of Texas, Austin, there was some poor college student the pipe had burst, right? And then it froze over the fan light and the icicles were coming down. I mean, that's how cold and wet it was in there. And I just was like, I'd come get you, but I can't get out of here. I mean, I didn't even
like that was a once in a lifetime, if that.
That's right.
Event.
That's right.
It will never happen again.
Yeah. And people were like joking around about it on social media. And I mean, I can see where if you're used to snow and ice, that it would be funny. But when you realize that basically Texas is warm weather, unless you get way up into the panhandle, it's warm weather all the time. I mean, it was 82 today, 84, something like that. We've been sitting out on the porch since early March, watching TV, having cocktails after work. So, and August might chase us in. It's a little warm.
I try to not go to Texas in summer. I did that once. I had to go to San Antonio in June once and never again.
Oh, well, there's ways to get around it. So, but the longer you live here, and it turns out I have an allergy to cedar. I think it's called cedar elm. And where do I live? Cedar Creek.
Yeah.
What's along the creek? Cedar elms. So it's been, a little bit of an adjustment, and the warm weather, starting about the beginning of May, like, don't even think about going walking, get a treadmill, like, seriously, so, and with my fair skin, like, I stand outside for 10 minutes and start to burn. So, but anyway, so the legislature's been dealing with that. They've been dealing with the budget, which is always a thing. I'm trying to think. I feel like there was something else major they were dealing with, but I'm so consumed with my 250 that I've forgotten what it is. There are all kinds of bills. Texas is a very religious state. And basically, I don't know how it is maybe in the panhandle, but basically nothing's open on Sundays unless you go into the city, and then you can find some restaurants and stuff like that. But like, the stores here are all closed. It's funny. And oh, by the way, make sure you buy your booze on Saturday night, because unless you can buy beer and wine at the grocery store on Sunday afternoon. So it's a little bit like living in Anne Arundel County about 30 years ago.
Or Carroll County today.
Okay.
Carroll County still has those laws.
Yeah, I've never lived in Carroll County. Yeah. So yeah.
I went to school there, so I know.
Oh, there you go.
I know some things.
You do know some things. So, and we know some people. So
we do.
So
yeah. So just kind of like how that, like how does that change your focus when dealing with all of those bills, knowing that you've only got this one session, and that you're not gonna be able to either have to work to stop something or work for something for 2 more years?
Well, some of the stuff obviously I'm neutral on, but I'm keeping track of it in case members want to know, and I can, some of the stuff that is horrendous, like, we've got a bill on universal background checks for everybody, including some family members. Like, I mean, it is just, so that bill was being heard the same day as the president came out with his, I'm going to sign an executive order. And I got all kinds of press calls, and my message was the same over and over again. You can have all the background checks you want in the world. The bottom line is, if the FBI isn't going after the guy that was denied because he's a felon, he's just going to go get his gun somewhere else. Bad guys are bad guys are bad guys. And trying to pass more legislation on law-abiding citizens is onerous and, frankly, unconstitutional, or anti-constitution anyway. I have not seen, there is a bill on it, but I have not seen, so here's part of the process. So in Maryland, when you drop a bill, if you drop it in time, you're guaranteed a hearing, right? Guaranteed a hearing. No, not in Texas. In Texas, you drop a bill, then you have to fill out a form requesting a hearing, and then the chairman goes, let me see, and then they decide whether you're going to get a hearing, and then generally speaking, the bill is left pending. It's more Robert's rules in committee. It's really actually kind of interesting. So then they may decide to vote on it later. They may never vote on it, which is, it's kind of standard stuff. But it's a really interesting thing, because I saw a bill declaring, the mayor of Austin, Austin has a serious homeless problem. They have a law that allows camping, so you literally can pitch a tent on a sidewalk. And they do. Mostly under the overpasses because it's dry, obviously, but they allow them to do this, and they, it's just a hot mess. And there are some places in Austin that, like, I'm not going even if I am carrying. So, so somebody, I guess, got irritated, and I can't tell you who it is off the top of my head, but got irritated and decided to rename. They wanted a bill to rename a certain highway the Stephen F. Adler bathroom highway or something like that, or toilet highway. And I was like, okay, that one's not going to be asked for a hearing, but it was funny. So there's a lot of back and forth with the mayor of Austin and the governor. Obviously, the mayor of Austin is very, very blue. And I mean, gosh, we know Greg Abbott. So, so very interesting stuff. But I grow concerned over these red flag laws, and it just really made me nuts when they passed them in Maryland, because literally what happens, for those of anybody's listening that doesn't know, if your neighbor decides that you frighten them and they go to the police and say, Brian frightens me because he parts his hair on the left and wears polo shirts. And the police decide, well, that's the good, oh, and he has guns. That's good enough reason, right? So then they go to a judge, and the judge says, oh, okay, sure. We'll give you this red flag order. It's called a protective order. And it's meant to say, Brian, stay away from your neighbor. But what they do is they show up on your doorstep, and I know preaching choir, but I don't know who's listening, who doesn't know. They show up on your doorstep with no warning. You have had no notice, no opportunity to defend yourself, no nothing. And they say, give me all your guns. And they just take them. And then you have to fight to get them back, where you should have been able to defend yourself. I mean, and in testimony on other bills that deleted due process, I'm like, we got on these shores because King George was trying people in absentia. I mean, yes, religious freedom and other reasons, but one of them was, we don't try people in absentia. We have due process. I mean, so a couple of the good guys down here did introduce some bills that said, if you get a protective order, and so currently in order to have a license to carry, or what in Maryland is called a CCW, here is called an LTC, license to carry. They had, if you were the victim of domestic violence and you're 18 years of age and you are otherwise, what am I trying to say? Qualified to have an LTC, then you may get an LTC. I testified for that one because, frankly, if you're old enough to drink, you're old enough to fight and die for your country, and old enough to pay taxes. What's the other one I'm thinking about? You're old enough to vote. I mean, for me, I don't even know why we raised the drinking age to 21. It's just ridiculous, because you can bleed to death for your country, but you can't handle a beer. So anyway, I digress. Again, you're going to have to keep me on the straight and narrow. So I testified, and I saw one of the representatives from, well, let's just say the other side of the aisle, kind of eyeballing me. And so I added into my testimony, and it's absolutely true, I am the survivor of domestic violence from about 30 years ago. And I didn't get into the weeds because, I mean, having been to these hearings, these guys know. They know the stories. And I said, but this would have enabled me to have some control, to feel some control over my life. I would have gone to a class, I would have learned, and I wouldn't have been afraid. And at that time I was a bartender. So I wouldn't have been afraid of him rolling into the bar, and I don't know what's going to happen next. So, one of those bills, and there's three different types. One lowers the age. One says we're going to expedite. And the other one says, I think, permitless carry immediately if you have a protective order, or no, you're going to be issued an LTC with your protective order, which I'm down with. One of those is going to be on the floor tomorrow. 250 bills. I'm just saying. So it's either tomorrow. I think it is tomorrow. So hopefully we'll get some. We'll get some relief for those who choose to utilize that method of self-defense. But as I said in my testimony, it is the height of misogyny to tell a woman that she cannot choose what legal method she wants to defend herself with. So, and most, not all, but most domestic violence survivors are women. So anyway, person on the left that was about to open her mouth didn't have anything to say.
That brings up an interesting point, though, because, so much of Texas is red. So many legislators in Texas are red. So a lot of times it's kind of, you're dealing with a lot of inter-Republican fissures more so than you are dealing with those on the left trying to stop something from going on. How does that change the dynamic? I mean, from the outside looking in, it sounds like that would limit the amount of bad bills that could get passed and get to the governor's desk. I mean, we know, you and I both know that Governor Abbott's not going to sign anything that's too far afield. We know that. But, kind of, how concerned are you when you see a bill that's introduced from the wrong side of the aisle, from the left side of the aisle? How concerned are you that bill is going to become law? I know what you're going to do. I know you're going to fight like hell against it, regardless of its chances of passage. But, statistically speaking, if you just put a number on it, how likely are these things to get very far in the legislative process?
Depends on how extreme it is. I mean, we're dealing with the Freddie Gray bill. And I apologize, I've not read that. I'm up to my ears. But I was talking with with a group of sheriffs over the weekend, in the past couple of days, and they were like, "Yeah, nobody consulted us. We had all kinds of things that we could have added that would have been really great to make this bill really strong, but nobody consulted us." So it depends on how nutty it is. I mean, Houston is very blue. Austin is very blue. Dallas is very blue. I forget what else. There are other blue centered spots. So, we're not seeing anybody trying to put a tax on streaming services in the middle of a pandemic like you guys did last year. I was like, oh my God. And
then they tried to say that it couldn't be passed on and labeled as a tax on your bill.
Right.
Which I said, hey, if they're so proud of their tax, let them take full credit for it.
Call it what it is, man. I mean, you remember when they upped the alcohol tax and it would say on the receipt alcohol tax, and we used to all write O'Malley's.
Well, no, I mean, there were places that actually printed that on the receipt. Yeah, I remember seeing them from time to time. But that's exactly, they remembered that. They didn't want that to happen again. So
right. So we're not, we don't really see, I haven't seen a lot of course, Texas is a lovely place because we have no state tax. And day after tomorrow being tax day. So, very interesting stuff. But we are fiercely independent, we Texans. And so we don't have a lot of, every now and then I'll see something like, oh, we want to charge extra for LTC licenses and put it towards this fund or whatever. And, the legislators across the board, except for maybe the most far left, understand that, taking an LTC class, getting fingerprinted, filling out the form and getting the background check, and then the fee for the LTC itself. I mean, it's not prohibitively expensive for some people, but for blue collar workers, for minimum wage workers, it should not cost you all the money to be able to defend yourself. And so, they all pretty much understand things like that, basic things like that. It's the I want to, it's the Lena Ortega, everybody needs a background check because look what happened in El Paso. And I got up and said, well, so El Paso and Midland had tragedies in the last few years, absolute tragedies. Both shooters went to an FFL, by the way, and were denied. Now, for your listeners, an FFL, when you put in your form for your background check, gets 3 words back. It will say proceed, it will say wait, it will say denied. It does not offer any explanation for denied or wait, none whatsoever. It just says. And so the FFL is like, sorry, dude, can't help you. So these guys went out and did what criminals do and, got it from another criminal. So, and the FBI knew that a criminal was trying to buy a firearm and did nothing. So when you talk about universal background checks, I kind of have a fit because it's not working now. And we've seen that and people have died because of it. So, I feel for these families because, it sounds like such a great fix, everybody should have a background check. But what happens when somebody goes to get that background check and they're denied? It's the Fed system. Nobody here can do anything about it. So, anyway.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. One of the concerns I'm sure that you have, I know it's been discussed, in other circles related to other political issues, is whether or not Texas is going to go blue. And I know that there's been a lot of concern about that. And there's been a lot of talk about it, but there hasn't been a whole lot of action towards it. The closest that we saw, a Republican lose in Texas statewide in a major race recently was 2018 at the Senate race when Ted Cruz was reelected. How concerned, your boots on the ground, you talk to people, both sides of the aisle, what's going on here. And obviously you're continuing to learn every day. How concerned are you that Texas goes blue in the future?
Well, so, it's an interesting thing. I have a lot of people say to me, yeah, but all those Californians are moving in. And I say, yeah, but here's the thing. They were moving in before I got here. And Texas voted for Trump. We gained 2 seats in the House and we lost 1 seat in the Senate, the House, the state Senate. So on balance, I think those people are moving here for the right reasons. Now we'll see, because so the reps down here, the representatives down here basically do a session. They get from Memorial Day until November, and then they have to file the run again. So they basically get 1 session in the running again. Those poor people. I mean, you really got to want to be a representative in Texas because, you get 1 session and then, boom, you're back on the campaign trail. I mean, you gotta love what you do. So I'm not really, I think the next election will be confirmation or denial of what I think. But what I'm seeing now is I'm not seeing a big, movement. The Democrats aren't getting a lot of traction here. And I read something the other day that said their donations were down. I don't remember where I read it. You're sitting on your phone and you read the news and this stuff just goes whizzing by your brain. But so that Alan West is our Republican Party of Texas chairman. I have to tell you that you and I have been to a lot of state conventions, a lot. That state convention was, oh my God. So I don't know if you were following it, and you probably weren't because you have a life. But
only to a point.
So a friend of mine is the national committee woman. And I called her up and said, hey, I'm here. And Pat Parker, Pat Parker. And
Pat's the national committee woman.
Now, is she still? She's in Arizona.
Oh, Arizona. I thought she was in Arizona.
Yeah, she is. No. Okay. So I called this friend of both Pat's and mine and said, Pat told me to call you. I don't know if you remember me, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, oh my God, welcome to Texas. I so remember you. You need to go to your county. So you have to go to the county delegation convention to be considered to be a delegate from, or an alternate delegate from that county to the state convention.
And for people who don't realize this, by the way, Texas has 254 counties. That is a lot.
Well, it's 10 times the size of Maryland.
Yeah, it's ridiculous how many counties they are when you start looking at it from like listing them off, and when you're trying to get people from the entire state of Texas, all 254 counties in one place. It's a lot of process.
Yeah. And so every county has so many delegates they're permitted and so many alternate delegates. So, and this is all going on in August. And we were supposed to get down to Houston, and I'm thinking, God, I really don't want to go. I mean, I want to go because I wanted to help Tony, and she did win, by the way. But I want to help Tony and I want to be there, but I'm scared to death I'm going to bring home something and infect. It's one thing if I get sick, that's on me. But if my husband gets sick, then I'm going to feel terrible. So then Houston said, oh, no, you can't come. Like, we know that you've rented the convention center. No, convention center's closed. So it was an interesting thing, as I understand it. Now, do I have facts on paper to prove this to you? No. But a girl hears things. And what I heard was the staff of the RPT went to the executive committee and said, look, just in case we can't get in Houston, can we start planning for a virtual conference? And the executive committee said, no, you can't. And trying to write down the name before I forget it. No, you can't. And then they took it to court and they lost. The RPT lost. And staff came back and said, can we just have something like on paper, like just something? No, we are meeting in person. I'm telling you, Texans are independent people, man, and God love them. But finally, they didn't get through the court system until Friday afternoon, and the convention was supposed to start Thursday. So none of this was discussed, of course, at the convention. So I can't say to you it's a matter of public record. I'm just telling you these are the things that I heard. But God bless him, the former chairman, James Dickey, did something that I have rarely seen. This man impressed me so much. Just as he would have taken credit had that convention been a success. And this thing, we were up until 3:00 in the morning on Friday morning. And then we met again at noon. And then we were, it just, because it was all virtual and there was no, and James Dickey, when it came time for him to, when it came time for speeches to be made, because he was running for chair again, stood up and said, this has not been a success. This has been a failure. And this is on me. I am the chair. I take full responsibility. And in my opinion, that admission cost him everything. And I have such admiration for somebody who would do that, because it would be very easy to not deal with it, pass the buck, whatever, but I think, and I don't know this because I have not spoken to the man, but I think he figured, if I'm going to take credit for it, I'm going to take the failure too. And what an incredibly honorable thing to do, So he lost the election. Colonel Alan West is now the chairman, and forward we go. Now, I have not, the committee in my county is a little daft. So I stopped getting involved with that because I just couldn't. As a former county chair, I was like, well, maybe live streaming your county meetings isn't the most brilliant idea, maybe not so much tipping off the Democrats before you do what you're going to do. And when they said, well, we won't live stream it, as a GOP county, but if anybody wants to live stream it individually, we'll allow that. And I was like, I'm done. So I'm all about transparency, but it's transparency and there's transparency. Like, don't show the other side your playbook. And that's what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a different one. That is a different one for sure.
And you sat on a committee, and I don't know, maybe you disagree. What do you think?
No, yeah, I'm all for transparency and open meetings, but if you're not gonna
show up,
there's a certain time where you close the meeting, and there's a certain time where you just have to just kick everybody out and turn the camera off or whatnot. And daft is a good word. That is a very, very good word.
Just didn't even know what to do with it. And there's a couple of situations like that, and I was like, I'm done. So
I mentioned the 254 counties as it relates to the number to dealing with the parties. How is that when you kind of bring it back to like TSRA stuff? Like, do you guys have like stakeholders in all of those counties? I know you mentioned you were talking to the sheriffs, but are you trying to like wrangle members and organizations in each of those counties? I mean, are there like constituent groups that are more regional, more local, county based under TSRA, or is that just kind of on an ad hoc?
I throw it all up against the wall, and whoever wants to come comes. NRA does the same thing. GOA does the same thing. People have different issues that they're more passionate about. When we're talking about permitless carry or constitutional carry, I call it permitless because it still requires you to comport with Texas law, as opposed to constitutional carry, which is, I can carry because I'm not a felon N2A, right? So for me, it's permitless, but apparently people understand it better when you say constitutional carry, whatever. But we have a military director, and we have a director for, yes, everything, and some of the most amazing people. But Bill called me and said, "Hey, do you need testimony?" I'm like, "What you got?" Yeah, I need testimony. What you got? And he goes, "Well, I want to talk about it from a military standpoint." I said, "Bring it." And Bill came down and he testified, and he said, "Look, for people who are temporarily assigned here, maybe they're here for a year, and like the wife or the husband who isn't military, having something permitless where you are clearly a law-abiding citizen because you're in the military or you wouldn't be in the military." So anyway, he made a very articulate and compelling argument, which it never occurred to me. We have directors for LTC. We have a northern director, a southern director, an eastern director. I mean, we've got, when I say we have a board of directors, honey, we have a board of directors. So it's quite the thing. So, that's what I tell people. If there is something you need related to 2A, come to me. I have a person for you. So, and it doesn't matter if it's skeet shooting or 3-gun matches or whatever it is. Hunting, we've got a hunting director who I need to call, by the way, but that's another story. Just because I got to find some place to hunt. So it's, I send out emails. We do have a magazine. The first thing they did was put me on, I'm pointing because my husband framed it and put it on the wall. The first thing they did after they hired me was, Peter is a former fashion photographer. He used to do that in addition to what he does now. And so he took pictures of me. And then we took an old picture of my dad and I from my first hunt. And we submitted those along with the article that I wrote, talking all about my Maryland experience and how I became Texan and this and that and the other thing. And they put me on the front cover. And I was like, oh my God, I'm the cover girl. That's no, that's Alex Schul. That's Lindsay Dodd. That's like all these beautiful, no, but the picture turned out pretty good. I think I'll have to send it to you.
Yeah, I've seen it. I saw it online. It was it was a nice spread. And just the fact that, I think when our Maryland friends see this and they hear paid staff magazine, they're going to be very, very jealous of what you guys have going on there down in Texas.
Well, so just like on the Eastern Shore, in the far out reaches of the Eastern Shore, we have an internet problem, which I assume hasn't been completely solved
They
yet.
did just pass it. They did just pass new broadband legislation recently, and they're finally allowing, like Chop Tank Electric is finally going to be able to like distribute internet using their stuff.
We've been trying for that.
I know that Matt Defoe has been working on for years. I mean, now we're talking real inside baseball now. But.
Yeah, when I was at Do It, we were trying to get that done. So yeah, but I mean, just make Maryland 10 times bigger, and imagine now that there are, really counties that have to go to McDonald's to get the kids' homework done or whatever. So it's the magazine is a very necessary item for our older members who, not necessarily internet savvy, but also don't have a lot of internet, don't have any internet in some cases. So, they're not getting my emails, right? So they're depending on the articles that I write. And the problem is, as you know, the deadline for putting out a magazine is usually like weeks in advance of when it actually hits the mailbox. So by the time I've written the article, it's all different. So are you now sitting in the woods?
What's that?
Did your background change? Are you now sitting in the woods?
No, my background's the same.
Oh, okay. Something changed. I don't know what it was. I'm just losing it. It's been a long day. We have hearings down here that are unparalleled in my experience. There was a hearing, not anything I had to participate in, thank God. But that hearing, that committee hearing went 24 hours. 24 hours. The one that I was involved in went 20 hours. And there were...
I remember correctly, you said it ended at like 6 o'clock in the morning or something like that?
Yeah, I got home at like 6:15, 6:20, and I only live about 25 minutes from the Capitol. So yeah, I mean, it was just, literally, I came outside, I had a cocktail, called Shannon because she's in another country, and it was a good time to be calling her. Got off the phone, sat on the bed, turned the TV on because I thought, I'll watch a little TV before I fall asleep. I have no idea what episode I watched. None whatsoever. I was so I didn't even realize how exhausted I was. And then last week we had a short one. It was only 16 hours.
Oh, okay.
We were delighted to be out of there by 2 o'clock. Believe me, 2 a.m. I mean, I was like, and my friend Tara was just like, they got to stop. They like.
I was going to ask, are these hearing like lengths common in Texas? I mean, it seems
uncommon.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that, and this happens occasionally. Gun day in Maryland, when they had gun day, was a long day, but it was not that long.
No, but the other thing is they don't have, one of the other differences is you can't stand up from your seat, like let's say in judiciary,
Mm-hmm.
Can't stand up in your seat from judiciary and say, my name is Andi Turner. I am, and me too, I'm in favor of the bill, and sit back down. They don't have that mechanism. So even if when I get up there to take a position for my association, I say to them, you always have to say who you are, who you represent, and if you're for or against the bill. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you've been up there 16 times, you got to say it every time. And they had John Locke come down to testify. And that was like the research that I was like blown away. And I looked at Tara, the NRA lobbyist, and I was like, oh my God, everything I wrote, I just feel like I just want to throw it out the window, because what else is there to say? And so I got up there and I said, Mr. Chairman, the TSRA fully supports this bill and the policies behind this bill, and we fully support John Locke's research. Thank you very much. I literally threw out pages of testimony because it was so much better than anything I could bring to the table. And man, when you know you're beat, jump up and down, So
especially when in a situation like that where he is articulating your position, it's not like you have been defeated because somebody else put out a better argument. It's just like, yep, that's exactly what we think too.
Yeah. And so we stood and we were counted and we stood behind. And the only thing they could bring the argument against it was somebody said, oh, well, he's been discredited because he created this entire persona online. And I was like, what? And then I found out that on some bulletin board somewhere, there was some instance where he had an alt name or something. But that doesn't discredit all the research he's done. And the research he's done is incredible. And it's based on credible sources. Anyway, I go on too long. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, I think we're going to kind of wrap it up here in a second. One last thing. We kind of talked a little bit about President Biden's executive orders. I have not had a chance to sit down and read them yet. How bad are they?
I mean, it ain't good. He wants universal background checks. He wants DOJ to put sample language together for red flag laws. And I mean, I just have all the things to say about this. Those were the big talking points from that day. And as I said to numerous television affiliates, again, you are making criminals out of law-abiding citizens. You're not doing anything to fight crime. None of these efforts fights crime. If my neighbor is acting like a whack job, I don't have any problem saying to the sheriff, these strange things are going on, and maybe you want to look into it, and trusting that my sheriff will go and look into it and say, yeah, you know what? Something a little daft about him. We better keep an eye on him or go have him evaluated or whatever. That's how you deal with criminals. And I'm really aggravated by a president who really just seems to want to dump, I believe it's the Fourth Amendment. Fourth Amendment is due process. Fifth Amendment, not to incriminate yourself, and Fourth Amendment is due process, but just wants to dump, the Bill of Rights into the toilet because it sounds good. It feels good. Doesn't do anything to help crime, but it feels good. So
if folks want to reach out, want to learn more about the TSRA, how can they do that?
Well, they can go to there's a Facebook page, TSRA. My PAC page is TSRA PAC, Political Action Committee. You can go to TSRA PAC, again, politicalactioncommittee.com. Sign up for my emails. I hope to be sending out an email very soon saying we have constitutional or permitless carry. That debate is Thursday. Cross your fingers. And if there's anything I can help anybody with, as always, I'm on Facebook, so come get me.
There are a few people more passionate about the Second Amendment than Andi Turner. Andi, it was good to catch up. Let's do it again sometime soon.
I would love that. Sine Die is Memorial Day, so maybe after that.
Sounds like a plan. All right. Thanks.
All right, bye, guys. Bye, Brian. Thanks.
This has been the Duckpin Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and download.